When we're younger, we feel like we're going to live forever. I get it. It's just a thing. I mean, I did a lot of things when I was younger that if my children did today, I think I would be absolutely mortified. And I'm sure I gave my parents a lot of gray hairs. And I'm sure that probably some of you guys are watching this video are feeling exactly the same. And the thing is that we hold on to this thought that we're going to live forever until our health actually declines or something happens to someone we love. And we really have to take a mindset shift around what is happening and what our outlook or what our perception of life really is. And it can happen drastically. It can happen over a long period of time. For me, it happened pretty drastically. And I'm going to start off by saying, hi, I'm Natalie Pelto. I'm the co-founder, one of the co-founders of Blue Life RX. And this video is all about gut health. And I'm going to share a little bit about why that intro specifically is going to lead into 3 tips or 3 different foods that are going to support gut health, which is one of my most actually asked about questions. A little bit about me. I am a gut restoration specialist. So I do have a lot of education on the gut, that and absolutely having studied it for years and years and years since our own health journey with my son and my husband. So today I'm going to share a little story about my husband that really did show us, or for me, started the process of understanding that number one, longevity and vitality are 2 completely different things, and that we are just not going to live forever, but we can choose to live as long as possible without sacrificing vitality, because really one without the other is not really great. So I'm going to start off by sharing a little bit about our story and how this began. My husband was, when we were married, he was 6 feet, almost 6 feet, just under, and he weighed 170 pounds, maybe 175 pounds. When I first met him, he probably weighed around 165. So he was always very tall and thin. But after we were married and after having my son, not having my daughter yet, but after having my son, I noticed we began noticing that there was some things happening to him that were pretty scary. He started to lose weight, and he started to lose weight very quickly. Within about 6 months, he went from 165 pounds to 130 pounds. And at 6 feet tall, you can imagine a small woman at 130 pounds at 5'5" is actually pretty thin. So we were very frightened. And going into many of these tests, and I'm sure that many of you guys can say that you feel exactly the same way when this process starts, even though this is a process that happens to a lot of people, both from healthcare experience. I know how many GIs I've done and barium enemas I've done. I also know that over 30% of our population has gut issues. So this is huge. And so as we started our process, this was a process I was familiar with working in healthcare. It doesn't change how it feels when it happens to you. In this moment, when we started to hear the words cancers, biopsies, Crohn's colitis, autoimmune, IBD, IBS, there was a lot of things that were unknown, and our minds as humans always go to the worst. So in his mind, my husband was gearing himself up to hear the big C word, which we know statistically is going to affect every other person in our world today, according to the statistics and the WHO and the WHO, I should say. And so this left us pretty stressed and strained. We had one and another child coming, so 2 young children almost. And it really felt disempowering, feeling like I didn't know what to do at home at that point. I hadn't been through all the specialties. I didn't understand anything about gut health. I didn't understand about the microbiome. And so as we went through our testing, it was really interesting that our lovely internist started off by saying, why don't you try removing gluten and dairy? Interestingly enough, I had already done this for our son. We had already been on the process of recovering his illness or his condition, or the severity of his condition. And as we moved through this, it was so simple for him. Like my husband and I'm sure that this is a huge one for so many people when you are told that you have to remove gluten and dairy and you have never done such a thing. It is really overwhelming to feel now. I mean, it's very overwhelming feeling inside, but at the feeling like you don't know what to eat. But truly, there are so many gluten-free options that we just didn't even have when we started our journey, that it's pretty amazing now that to be told that that you need to go gluten and dairy free. There are like mountains of options, which is wonderful. But that's not what this chat is about. And I'm not here to tell you those things today. I'm just here to share a little bit of the story and what I've learned since. So to make the long story short is my husband was finally given a diagnosis of possibility of having IBS. And we decided to take a very natural approach to it. And so as we started moving through his own healing journey, I began learning about the I was already deep in the microbiome, but we started to implement those tools with him. So the microbiome is basically your guts, not just your guts, but it's actually a ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, and viruses, many different species. We call it the microbiota. So basically think of yourself as this beautiful planet housing all of these forests and species. And it's so important to keep those species alive, because without them, you actually die. And without you, they die. So you actually have this synergistic relationship with your microbiota. And it's extremely important to keep that microbiota healthy, fed, and happy. And so we started on this process. Now, in the beginning process, and this brings me back to the 3 tips that we're going to talk about today, and that are so, so important. The three foods that you can safely introduce that are going to feed your microbiota and are going to not give you as many problems. When you start to actually support the gut and to overcome the layman's term of leaky gut, also known as gut hyperpermeability, which means that the gut wall has been damaged and is no longer absorbing nutrients that well and is depleted and is beginning to be so depleted that the wall of the gut is separating, and not the wall, but the cells that are supporting a healthy barrier to keeping the bad things like going and moving through, and then keeping the bad things out of the rest of your body. When that happens and we see the separation and the bad stuff, we'll call it toxicity. I mean, you're trying to go to you're meant to wait. That's the waste we want to get rid of. And so as this happens, we can have this toxicity be reabsorbed through the bloodstream, go rampant throughout our body, cause all kinds of issues such as brain fog, inflammation, diabetes, stress, anxieties, depression. I mean, almost all conditions can be linked to poor gut health. And yes, in the UK, if we think about it, when you have a condition that is chronic, like a chronic illness, they actually inquire, how is the state of your gut? Here in Western medicine, we are slowly catching up to this process, and that is a beautiful thing. So, but the thing about Western culture is that there's also a few different things that we can do to help our gut. But when we introduce certain foods, such as high FODMAP foods, so these are foods that ferment in the gut a little bit more, they can cause discomfort. And so even though we think we're feeding our gut very well, we also end up with more issues, more flare-ups, more discomforts. So trying to do a low FODMAP diet is actually not good to do long-term, but understanding that there are certain foods to introduce at the beginning that are low FODMAP, that are going to feed the gut bacteria, create a healthy environment, and then keep you moving forward without discomfort is a huge deal. So what are those 3 foods? So the 3 foods that I'm going to share with you today are really simple. So kale is a big one. I know that everybody is like, oh, does it have to be kale? The thing about kale that's really magical is leafy greens are extremely important. Not only are they important, but they're multivitamin, microvitamin full. And that means that they have multi-purposes in the body. So they can support many different systems, and they can support healthy sleeping, and healthy rest and deep sleep. We want to have those foods in us, and we also want to have the reduction in discomforts, right? So kale is actually one that is considered low FODMAP and is a great addition, whether you want to put it in a smoothie, not juicing it, putting it in a smoothie because you want to have the fibers. The fibers are what feed the gut. But putting it in a smoothie, eating it as a salad, adding it just a little bit on top of salad, having some kale chips that are roasted at a very, very low temperature that don't destroy the nutrient content, that's a great way to introduce kale. The next one is actually ginger. Ginger is a powerhouse. It's also very supportive to a, not just a healthy gut, but also a, like we all know that it helps with nausea, it helps with digestion. So it actually eases some of the already existing gut discomfort. Again, using the ginger in its whole form. We're not trying to use ginger oils. We're not trying to use ginger powder. We want to introduce ginger in its whole form and use it in recipes. A lot of Asian recipes have wonderful amounts of ginger in them. Ginger is definitely one that I like to introduce. You can include ginger tea and things like that, but always remember that the fibers are what feed the gut the most, even though that the nutrients can be very helpful, but the fibers are what are creating, you know, the gut permeability that's getting healed. And then lastly is actually I'm going to give two, arugula and edamame. The reason that I'm giving two is that arugula is really easy to get at the grocery store. It's easy to put in pastas, just to throw it in. It's easy to put just on top of lettuce, on top of soup. It's just this multiverse salad that you don't have to have as a base salad, but it's great to have as extra nutrient content. The reason I wanted to add edamame was because I wanted you guys to have access to a plant-based protein that's actually very powerful. And it's one of the macronutrients as well as having many micronutrients. So edamame, which is also a soybean, is really going to support a healthy gut as well. They each have their own ways of feeding it. Now, for the most part, I've given you greens this call, and we're going to be finishing up now, but I've given you mostly greens. Remember that the best way to feed the gut is actually to eat the colors of the rainbow. And sometimes less is more when you're trying to introduce new foods to a hurting gut. Sometimes it's not about what the food is, but the amount. So you might get away with cabbage, which is for some people extremely hard, even though it is a absolutely wonderful food for the gut. But sometimes eating just 75 grams or eating a little bit of less is more is still going to feed the good gut bacteria, but not going to give you the discomforts. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to, if you want to learn more about this kind of topic, I have a huge video already recorded and in the Blue Lifers membership, you will see. And if you are someone, this is pretty exciting, this is the first time we actually launched this. If you're someone who struggles to just bridge the gap of eating healthy foods because of the taste and the bitters, I highly recommend watching the video below. We actually created a masterclass, it's completely free, to help you guys navigate picky eating and how to introduce more plant-based, plant-rich nutrition into your diets. So I can't wait to see you next time. Talk to you guys later.